fine.
All right, with that, please note attendance of Councilmember Cotton, Councilmember Washington, and mayor and staff. And as you see fit appropriate, other things. Let's go ahead and move into oath of office for Councilmember Watton. Or Councilmember Washington.
I knew what you meant.
Touche.
Yeah, you're getting me back.
Yeah. Who will be doing?
We're just do it here. It's an informal one with the formal ceremonial one being held at the 22nd, right?
Do I just stay here? Or?
Yeah, just go ahead and stay there. There's 2 oaths of office there. If you could sign both of them. One is for me, one is for you.
All right. Good. Yeah. Good.
Okay,
Good
and then
paper.
Yeah,
Frame
great. It's
it,
official.
Yeah. Frame it at your house.
Yeah, seriously. Okay.
Okay,
One for you?
Yes.
Gina? Okay. It doesn't matter.
as long as your signatures are the same. Okay, then I'll just have you repeat after me.
Okay.
Raise your right hand, please. Nope, go ahead and have a seat. That way it's on the microphones. You don't have to stand.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'll sit down.
So raise your right hand. I say your name.
I, Louis Washington,
Having been duly elected to the office of City of Snoqualmie, City Council Position Number 4,
having been duly elected to the office of the City of Snoqualmie, City Council Position Number 4,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my ability,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of my office as prescribed by law to the best of my abilities,
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances, resolutions, and policies of the City of Snoqualmie,
and that I will support and maintain the ordinances, resolutions, and policies of the City of Snoqualmie,
and the laws and Constitution of the State of Washington and of the United States of America.
and the laws and Constitution of the State of Washington and of the United States of America.
Great, congratulations.
Yay.
For another 4 years.
It's pretty much a volunteer position for however long you want. Up to 4 years. All right. Let's move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any revisions or notes of concern in regards to the agenda as presented? And Kat, I will try to keep an eye, but if you need to wave your hand at me, do that. All right. Unless there are objections, we'll go ahead and take the agenda as presented as approved. If there are no objections, we'll go ahead and move on. All right, public comments. Are there anyone either in the audience tonight or online wishing to make public comment for the committee on subjects not currently on the agenda? I see no public here, and I don't see any hands up online. All right, so unless others see something I don't, we'll move on with approval of the minutes. You jumped on me. Approval of the minutes dated December 5, 2023. Chair has no comments or revisions in regards to the minutes. Any of the council members?
I do not at this time.
Unless there are objections, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with the minutes as presented as approved. Seeing no objections, we'll take them as presented as approved. All right, let's move to approval of warrants and claims. Consideration of claims approval report dated January 8th, 2024. I'd like to thank staff. There were some catch-ups just before prior. And thank you for heading this off at the pass with questions and whatnot and getting that. Having said that, are there any other questions or comments in regards to the claims and warrants?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay.
Do you want to point out that some of this is coming out of the Tyler system?
Nope.
So the claims, the portion of the claims in the box in the upper left-hand corner is actually coming out of Munis. Unfortunately, we had one of our employees that she's been actively working within the accounts payable module of Munis that was on vacation during Christmas. And so consequently, that's why we needed to update the claims approval report, because she's the only one that knows how to exactly pull that information out from there. She has produced basically a new format. I can tell it's a little bit small on the screen, so I'll be having a conversation about that, about possibly flipping it from portrait to landscape, but we'll get there. And indeed, this is coming out of Munis, or at least a large chunk of this, so thank you.
I think it has a lot more detail than what we have seen before, which is good.
Which is good.
That is good.
All right. Unless there are objections, we'll go ahead and proceed forward with the claims report approved as presented. Are there any objections or concerns? All right, hearing none, we will proceed
Councilperson
forward with,
Cotton's raising her hand.
excuse me?
Councilperson Cotton's raising her hand.
Councilman Cotton, go ahead.
Yes, I just had a question. If looking over some of the expenses, there were a few, they weren't big expenses, but they were judgments that were given to certain individuals. I'm assuming there's some history there about that. If that's all within line. And then there was one unspecified construction cost for like $252,000. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the name without scrolling down and looking at the name of the company, but most of them were very specific on what they were for, like, Sandy Cove or whatever other improvements. Does anybody off the top of their head have an idea about that one?
I mean, so what we can do with that itself is probably email you back with some more information regarding that once we can locate it within the packet itself, and we can follow up with you on that itself. In terms of the judgment and settlement, I would say that was likely taking place behind executive session, and there's probably a decision coming out of that. And so I would want to maintain that itself and those prior decisions from council.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you could let Drew know the page and the item of question, and Drew, if in your response, you could cover the rest of the committee in that response also.
Okay, I'll send him an email.
Cool. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah.
We'll still move those forward to next council, and we can pull off consent if there are issues raised as a result of those questions. Okay, let's move then to Agenda Bill AB 24001, resolution regarding Public Records Act policy, records management policy, and updated fee schedule.
That was mine. So what you have before you is a proposed resolution with 3 exhibits. The first one being an update to our Public Records Act policy, and then a new records management policy, and then an updated fee schedule. So we were implementing the Laserfish enterprise content management platform. And within that, we were making some changes in how we receive public records requests and where we're storing our documents. So we don't currently have a records management policy, so now's a good time to have one. It just goes into more detail on what staff are going to do and our rules and best practices regarding records. It's not anything we've already adopted the state schedule on retention, so that this is just sort of expanding on that and explaining it to staff. In terms of if I back up a little bit, in terms of the Public Records Act policy, most of it is just minor changes, cleaning it up, making it more current in terms of how the public is going to submit a public records request, and then what staff will do. But it is a little more organized and kind of in the process of how we would go about responding to that. There's not that much in the terms of changes, though. I've kept most of the main previously adopted rules in place. And then in terms of the fee schedule, we don't adopt, or we don't recoup that much in the way of fees. I have thanks to Drew, last year we only recouped $469 worth of fees, and a lot of that is due to staff doesn't really know how to interpret the current policy, so we just don't charge because it's not real clear on how we're supposed to charge and really when we're supposed to charge. So we're asking for some more clarity on with an updated fee schedule. I've gone out to other jurisdictions and gotten samples from Issaquah, Kennewick. Those are the two big ones that have done newer or more recent adoptions in their fee schedules, and this format is the way they do it. They outline how the charges are calculated and then what the charges will be. So it's really, this fee schedule is just a little bit more, it goes a little bit deeper so that staff can understand it and know when to charge a fee. And hopefully we can start recouping some of those fees on these more complex and frequent requesters. Although our numbers of public records requests for this year did not surpass last year's number, a lot of these are very layered requests. So you get one request, it's like actually, 5 or 6 different things involved in that. And so, if you did one for every one, then our numbers would be a lot higher. But to help to sort of quantify how many requests we're getting, I did do an audit of all the 2023 requests to see how much time has been spent, how many documents have been given, how many documents were reviewed. That's going to be on page 1, 2, 3 of the agenda bill. And we spent 288 hours responding to public records requests, which is about 24 hours a month that we spend. We've reviewed over 30,000 records, and we produced a little over 4,700 that were responsive and therefore produced to the requesters. So we spend a lot of time reviewing records, providing records. It's just very time consuming. And so if there's any way we can't necessarily charge our time for looking for records, but we can charge for producing records. And so we really need more clarity on how and when we can charge. So that's what the new fee schedule really does. It's taking the same rate that the previous fee schedule adopted, although that was in an hourly rate that was under the previous resolution, and I just calculated at the minute because that's really how we charge is per minute.
It helps in the clarity because the last one said $67 an hour charged by the minute.
Right.
Yeah, it was a little confusing.
It is confusing. Like what starts that time? Like how do we? And so like I said, the very last document in this packet is the methodology used to determine. So it really goes deep into, this is how staff will know, and also the public will know, this is how we calculate our fees. And so they will know up front, these are the steps the staff will do, and that's really when the clock begins.
Very good. Was there a question online that I missed, or?
I lowered her hand. She lowered her hand at the same time, so I went back
Okay.
up and
Oh,
lowered it again.
And those were kind of the highlights of this packet. It is a lot. There's a lot to read through here. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So it doesn't look.
Go ahead.
Here's my hand.
Go ahead, Councilor Motion.
Thank you. So it looks like making a request for public records has not changed. Looks like
Right.
that process is still the same. Okay.
Right. The process is still the same.
Okay.
Right, except that we're moving away from the next request platform, and I created a form within Laserfish, and that went live yesterday. So we're still kind of working out the bugs on that, but it is live. People have made requests, and we're working through that, and it's just a different way of receiving them. And people can still receive them we can still receive them in person, over the phone, although that is frowned upon because it's harder to get a clear description of what people want over the phone. They can fill out the paper form, send it in. I mean, pretty much the public can make a request in lots of different ways. We do prefer the form online because it has the information that we need from them. It's a simple form though. They don't have to log in. Unlike with Next Request, they don't have to log in and create an account. It's just a fillable form online, and then it goes through an automated workflow, comes to me, and then it goes out to the departments.
I'm just curious, just in terms of costs, do we ever see where individuals will make a request, maybe online or on the phone, and they never show up to pick up the records?
So we do actually prefer the electronic, like we would email them to them, right? not that many people want them printed. We do have a few requesters who want to come in and pick up their paper ones. I mean, it does create a problem because the volume is, and so then we spend a lot of time printing those. Of course, that's a service that we do have to provide. So we do generally encourage people to receive them electronically, and then they can print whatever they want to print wherever they can print things. But yeah, if people want it printed, we will print it for them. And then currently we're charging 15 cents a page. I'm asking that we up that. That's what we've always
30
charged
cents.
to 30 cents a page.
But you will do
And we-
down payments.
We have had occasions where individuals may not be aware of the volume that generates as a result of the request, and they have refused receipt of the printed deliverable because of the cost,
Upon learning the cost.
upon learning the cost, but didn't mean we didn't incur the cost.
Right. And so in the requesters that we have, typically I'll say, no problem. I will print that for you. Just so you're aware, it is, and then I have to go in and figure out how many pages it'll be. So that is very time consuming as well. But I'll say like it's, 157 pages. So at 15 cents, this is what the cost will be. So I give them a heads up before they get here so they know what the cost will be.
Okay.
And then of course we can mail it to them as well, but then there's postage on top of that. We do, if there's a request that's very large and we know that there will be lots of responsive records, we have been getting in the habit of asking for a deposit, which is what we that is part of our current process. If we anticipate it's going to be, a large amount, then we're allowed to ask for 10% of the anticipated costs.
Okay.
So, and we've done that several times with lots of different people. And we charge on large requests, especially large requests, which is typically all that we're charging for now. I've charged people from the county before, they wanted like a whole list of things, and it's like, okay, well, this is the cost of uploading, because right now that's all that we've been able to determine that we can charge for is the uploading, which is not true if we do our own fee schedule, right? So, and recently I charged somebody from I think it was the public defender's office. It was $18, which is not a lot, but when we're not typically recouping any costs, it does help in the grand scheme of things. And it kind of makes people take it seriously as well. It's like, you can ask for all that, but it is very the staff time is very heavy to do this kind of work, and we are required to do it. So, we're not really complaining about that, but we want people who are serious. Like, I really do want those records, right? Or I need those records, and people that are serious about the records, they don't even bat an eyelash at it. It's part of doing business. So we're not the only ones that charge.
Right.
It's just that we haven't been charging what we could be charging.
Kat, you have a question?
Just a comment that since there's only two people that are right now technically handling this workload, it seems reasonable. And I know you only like the increase that I saw in your table. I think you could have like doubled that again, for what it is that you guys are doing. So I think anything that you feel is equitable is certainly for worth your for you and LT's time and energy. I'm all for it.
Thank you. So at police, it's Melinda. Melinda is the one that does primarily the public.
Melinda, okay.
Yeah. And then I do them. And then I do have other staff members in departments. So if there's a request that is from community like building, then Becky helps me. Or if it's from finance, then Kyla or Elise will help me. But typically it's Melinda and I are doing the heavy lifting on those. And really she gets the bulk of it, because a lot of them are police requests. The bulk of them are police requests. The other requests that I get are usually the more complex ones, where it's emails, all emails since 2009. That's a lot of reviewing emails to go through. And so that's kind of where the records management policy comes in. If I'm going to be honest with you, we are very behind in our records management retention. And it's overwhelming to every department. So I'm really trying to work with staff, and it will help to have a policy in place so that I can refer staff back to that to help them understand how critical it is that we are, that we are slowly chipping away at our backload of records that the state says that we should no longer have. I mean, the state has a retention schedule for a reason. We're not meant to hang on to every single piece of paper forever. So if there's a retention schedule for it, then we need to be, doing our best to keep up with it so that we're not, because communication, for instance, is, unless it's a executive or advisory member, like council members or directors, it's to 2-year retention on email. So there's no reason we should have emails from 2009. So we just have a huge backlog to get through, and it, like I said, it is overwhelming. So we just really want to take it a little bit at a time and not overwhelm the staff that we have, and just do the best we can, but really try to make some steps towards making it better and making it more manageable.
So just for the other council members, be aware, with us and other municipalities, records request has been used for the sole purpose of absorbing staff time by individuals. This became really an issue. Again, because it was a practice of, anytime a council member mentions the word Chihuahua in an email, I want to see it. That generates a lot of time. Okay? So even at the state level, this is all per RCW. At the state level, this became an issue, and this is why the RCW is out there, that you can put in place these kinds of fee schedules to recoup the time to do these requests for informations, in response to requests for informations, and that has the effect of, in essence, if you're going to pay for it, you must really want it, and you go through it, and it weeds out some of the frivolous responses just to absorb staff time.
Right.
Yeah.
But we can't charge our legal fees, and so quite a few of these documents then do go through legal review to be redacted. So there's so much more costs than what we can actually charge for.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the very thorough explanation.
And like I said, there is a lot to this agenda, Bill. So if you end up having questions later, just email me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions or comments from anybody in attendance tonight in regards to this agenda bill? Please raise your hand and let us know. I don't see hands up. All right, next question. This for discussion with general counsel in the Monday to come council meeting, or should this go on consent? I would recommend consent. It's good news to have out there, but I would just recommend consent just in respect for the time the council has.
Well, because we do have AB 24002, that's going to be just good. And there's no change. There's no fiscal change here.
For this,
yeah.
no.
So yeah, I would agree with that consent agenda.
So one thing to note is because it is regarding fees that we would be charging the public, we do have to have a public hearing on this. So I wanted to bring this to the FNA first so we could talk about it. And then my proposal is to have this on the January 22nd council meeting so that we could so I can advertise for the public hearing. So we'll do a public hearing, and then
So it's not an ordinance, so it doesn't require, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just so I understand, it's not an ordinance, so it doesn't require a second reading, but a public hearing,
Right, it's a resolution, right.
because it's a resolution.
And the public hearing is because of the fees,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Makes
So,
sense. Okay.
Okay, so we can have the public hearing on the 27th, as well as go ahead and do the agenda bill and approve it on the 27th.
okay,
That
22nd.
probably leaves it off consent just
Okay.
for
Off
the
consent.
mechanics.
Again, put it,
Thank
put
you.
a resolution on consent, okay?
No, you can't. I can't remember. All right, let's then move on to agenda bill 24002. If if I can read that, what is basically biennial budget amendment. Just as I was getting to read it, you took it off the screen for me. But Teamsters, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members. I'm Jana Walker, budget analyst. Oh, manager, budget manager.
That title change.
Grand Poobah. Go ahead.
Okay, this amendment relates entirely to the collective bargaining agreement that was approved in Agenda Bill 23-143. And on the screen, if you look, this is the table that shows what the city will be paying to cover this retroactive CBA. The total cost at the very bottom, $735,000, is the check that we're writing, if you recall. However, we had planned for a small increase within the budget, so we only have to increase the budgetary appropriation by $537,000. The second aspect of this amendment is that there are some internal cost allocations, and this chart was also part of those, part of that document, that original agenda bill. You can see down at the bottom is $124,000 that is allocated. I realized after the fact, though, that I did not include general fund allocations. So the amendment includes a larger allocation because that was not considered in the agenda bill. However, the allocations, it's revenue in one place in the city and out another place in the city, so it does zero out for the balance of the city's entire budget. So what that looks like in terms of an amendment, the first one there is the actual Teamsters collective bargaining agreement. We're asking for an amendment of $537,398, and that appropriation goes across the general fund, the utility funds, utility capital, non-utility capital, and then also internal service cost allocation funds, which.
Who's running the screen right now?
Yeah, because
Can we
we're in a
back up-
different.
Back up a page.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's try that again.
Thank you. Thought it was just
I
me.
know the page you were talking about and where it was, but it was,
Okay.
we weren't on that page.
We see it now up there. So $537,398 is the appropriation that we're requesting so that we can pay both the retroactive 2023 increase to Teamsters salaries and then also 2024. So that covers both years. And then the number 2 is where the cost allocations occur. And that's $200,934 for a grand total of $738,332. And if we go to how that falls on each fund, you can see at the bottom, if I scroll, here we go. You can see that number from the first table, 537,000, is how much the budgetary appropriation is increasing across the city. There is some revenue in there for IT, for ER&R, for the fleet, for facilities, and then also for general fund. And so that decreases some of the expenditures in those funds, and the remainder of it goes across the city wherever Teamsters employees are.
Can I ask if you can go back to that first slide, please? Gonna admit I'm a little bit lost.
Yep.
Okay. So we're adding in the retroactive from 2023 and then the cost and then the costs of 2024.
That's right. That first column of data of dollars is the 2023 retroactive cost. However, because of empty positions or we did budget for a small increase in salaries, things like that, we don't need all of the appropriation The check that we'll be writing is $373,000. However, we don't need to increase the appropriation quite to that level. We only need to increase it $175,000, and that is what you'll find in the budget amendment. And that's only for 2023.
Okay, and so that's roughly the difference, the $200,000.
That's right.
Delta there, okay.
And we're able to do that difference because we've already experienced 2023. We know about where our budgetary numbers fell.
Okay.
And for 2024, you can see that we've just included that entire cost. We might have some cost savings in some places if there's a vacant position or if we have less overtime than we expected. But currently, our best guess says we will have to pay this over and above what we budgeted for 2024. If you combine those two, 2023 and 2024, you come up with the $735,000. That is the first column and the third column.
Okay.
And then if you combine the second and the third column, you come up with the required appropriation,
Okay.
$537,000.
Okay, so again, roughly that's the $200,000, okay.
That's right.
So let's hold on. So again, although the cost difference per contract is $735,000, some of that was already pre-budgeted. So the total budget allocation change is $537,397.
The total, well, there are two steps, as I said.
I'm not worried about the cost allocation.
Okay, yes, then yes.
Just because that all zeroes out. What goes out comes in, zero.
Correct.
Okay, but to the grant, to the boundary layer around the city, there's $537,397 additional costs. Okay, so my question back on the agenda bill though is, why is that number not stated versus the 735 as the appropriation needed?
Do you mean the amendment agenda bill or the?
The agenda bill right there says 738. Why
Okay.
isn't it 5?
Because we have to increase the appropriation for the internal cost allocations. We have to increase it both for the Teamsters payout and then also for the internal cost allocations. Even though the money is moving from one fund to another, we budget on a fund basis. So whenever the fund exceeds the appropriation that we planned for, we have to change that appropriation. The money is staying within the city boundaries, as you described them, but we still need the authority within the fund to move them through our internal cost allocation process. And the best way that that is shown is,
I totally agree with what you say, what you said. I still have issue with that agenda bill. At a city level, total change of appropriation is 535.
yes, what I'm not asking for are revenues. So there are revenues that are associated with this. Every time you have an internal cost allocation, say IT charges for computers that they provided to whatever department, they receive revenue and that department pays them revenue. So you're seeing only the expenditure side so that we can request an additional appropriation.
Yeah.
Do you,
The appropriation really only pertains to the expenditure side of the house. So anytime that a fund, for example, the general fund is paying for IT, which is a separate fund overall, we have to account for that and appropriate for that. If we happen to exceed our total appropriation, even if it includes internal cost allocation things, as what she's suggesting, then we're in trouble with the state auditor. It's very much like a transfer. We're transferring money from the general fund into the non-utilities capital fund, basically to support our capital projects. If we didn't appropriate for that and exceeded that appropriation down the road because we happen to spend what we said we were going to spend on capital projects, for example, or in the general fund, for example, if we just hit our budget targets of the money that was actually leaving the door, but we didn't account for that $2.5 million that was actually going over into the non-utilities capital fund, we would be in trouble overall. So we have to account for all the transactions that are actually taking place, money leaving the door outside the city to pay for employees, but then all the transactions that are happening between the separate funds. It's very much like we're running a mini conglomerate here, where we've got multiple lines of business that are often talking to each other. And we have to keep track of each separate one, and each separate one needs its own appropriation, basically. So IT's charging, for example, as a business, basically, the general fund, police, fire department, we have to account for those charges that they're paying for IT services as a part of their total appropriation. And that's really what she's getting at through here, is the impact to that. And we have to calculate that because you've got fleet and IT that are seeing their employee costs increase over time. How are we going to be able to compensate that and how are we going to be able to protect their fund balances, basically, if we're not therefore then as well charging out those service charges to the rest of the direct service department? So that's what we're trying to account for this. If we don't do that, eventually we're going to get in trouble with the state auditor's office. So thank you.
I may come back with questions, but all right.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask him for remedial education offline versus doing it right here. For me, remedial education. Okay.
I'll just add to that. The goal over time of why we've been consolidating all these funds to this point is to help reduce the charges between the funds so that we don't over or have to appropriate more than actually the money that is actually leaving the door of the city. So often what we'll report during the budget is, say, $100 million that the city may have budgeted in total, but really the amount of money that's actually leaving the cities into employees' pockets or to pay for vendors is often less than that, just because we have to account for all the transactions that are taking place between the different departments and funds within the city.
So it's, yeah, I guess the way I'm seeing this, Director, is that it's more of an accounting exercise more than it is an expenditure. Is that?
Well, correct. So certainly the $200,000 is certainly an accounting exercise. The $537,000 is indeed money that is more. It's a cost, as Councilmember Holloway suggested, that is actually going into the employees' pockets more than what we've budgeted. And so we have to make sure that we account for that. But then as well as how is IT going to generate enough revenue, right, in order to support their services if their employee costs are increasing up to the 60th percentile plus the 6% COLA? Well, they have to charge the police department back here basically for that itself. And so consequently, if we didn't increase their appropriation, the police department's appropriation along with this, right, because they're paying for those services, then we're going to, hamper the police department eventually, and they'll struggle therefore too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay. Councilmember Cotton, you have any questions? All right. I move this one forward to council, but just given the dollar figure, non-consent.
Absolutely, I agree.
Drew can go through that explanation again for the rest of the council.
I think I'll participate in that remedial education.
It's an ordinance.
All right.
It's an ordinance, right?
It's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance, yeah.
So 2 readings.
So that'll be the first reading next week.
Yep.
So the
First reading next Monday and
Second
final
reading,
reading 2 weeks from Monday.
22nd.
Okay, that concludes the agenda bills for this. We do have discussion of revenue options. Is this really, isn't this going to be part of the conversation we're going to have tomorrow night?
Yes, it is.
Okay, do we need to dive into these tonight or have that as part of tomorrow night's discussion?
No, we just were making it available if you wanted to dip your toes into the pool early.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind because
Okay. But let's just go through them real quick in that case.
Thank you.
So Agenda Bill AB 2404, ordinance establishing 1/10 of 1% sales tax within the boundaries of Snoqualmie Transportation Benefit District. This would increase the current TBD sales tax?
Yes, by 0.1%. So I think currently we're at 8.9% in terms of the sales tax locally. This would increase to 0.1%, increasing the sales tax rate across the city to 9%. The city doesn't collect that fully. In fact, we get pretty substantial, low fraction of that overall. It's primarily the state that collects the majority of the sales tax. There's certainly a fee that's associated with that will go back to the Department of Revenue, relatively minimal, and we will generate, let me scroll down, roughly, really starting in 2025, which would be hopefully encompassing a full year, around $319,000 is what we're estimating as a part of this. When we come to you with the presentation tomorrow, we're certainly going to have a slide deck as well, which will provide more information. We're really looking forward to, in terms of getting into how this will change our financial forecast, kind of looking forward as well. So we're really looking forward to that discussion with you tomorrow, and this is really just for your consideration today.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have additional questions. I can wait till tomorrow.
Okay.
On that one.
So Mayor Pro Tem, we did put together a tool. It's in Excel to work, but as you have these discussions, you can actually see the effect on revenues and cumulative. So if you choose 1 and 4, what that effect is, and that is available and on the screen if you want to use it now.
Okay. Okay.
And Jenna did all that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Good time.
Spreadsheets are fun.
Yeah, all right. I
So,
do.
We wanted to give council max optionality, I guess, in this scenario. So that's why you've got 5 agendables in front of you. We're looking, like I said, forward to that conversation tomorrow. There may be maybe some public concern out there that we're presenting council with 5 separate agenda bills. Just know that the administration is not advocating necessarily for all 5 collectively together. So we want to make sure that that's clear for everyone. We just want to put it out there for your guys' up or down votes and what you actually want to potentially pursue. So that's why you have 5 of these in front of you.
Okay. And actually, the next one then is AB 2005, which is to increase the B&O tax from 0.5 to 0.2%?
0.15% to 0.2%. So consequently, this would be the maximum rate that we could potentially go to in terms of B&O tax itself. Imposed pretty much across the board. Different industries would be impacted by this. It is a councilmanic option available to council. This would primarily impact the businesses, but certainly the businesses could potentially pass along some of the costs associated with this to the residents that live here as well. We expect to generate roughly about 2025, about $253,000 starting in that year and then inflated across time. As a result of this, we also have provided, at least part of the presentation that we'll see tomorrow, Jana also wrote a memo as a part of this that's showing the average impact to a business overall, too. So we've got that memo attached as well for your consideration.
So we're talking about 250 escalating from there.
Yeah.
If we were to do this. All right.
The reason why that you see kind of 2024 a little different across the charts is just depends on timing. So the Department of Revenue requires us to have, there's certain filing deadlines for sales tax revenues in order for us to kind of start generating that. Then there's usually a 2-month lag in terms of which we would receive it. Other things that council may want to consider is, the impact on residents versus non-residents, for example. So we certainly have a lot of tourists that come through here, and some of these revenue sources will be able to draw upon those members of our community, outside of the community, that visit Snoqualmie as well. And so as a part of the overall effort that Jana has substantially done over the past week, especially after coming back from Christmas this year, is to actually estimate per resident how much tax we anticipate that would generate, I think, overall, if I'm correct on that. So she's certainly got a table for that as part of the presentation for tomorrow.
Chair.
Yep.
So these are options, but there might be other options besides these, such as, I'm not sure if you have in here like a square footage option for large warehouses that hardly pay any, tax, for instance, might be one thing, but so we don't have to buy into, we don't have to
No, yeah, these,
so many other options outside there than just this, so.
These are kind of the large, right,
Right.
ones
these
that,
are all-
yeah,
Other options too.
swung over to say, this is how far you could go. We could go something less, something
right, yeah.
anywhere in between.
You can mix and match,
I don't want people to go crazy saying,
right,
you're driving every tax to the maximum and
right.
you politicians.
Right. We're trying to balance our books for a period of time. Certainly know that there's other options available to us, not just necessarily looking at revenue increases, but the city has certainly over time with this administration explored efficiencies as well. There's been certainly some staffing agenda bills that have come through council that would kind of indicate that for the most part, that this is an administration that has really looked hard to try to find those savings internally first before returning back to council with any sort of revenue proposals. In addition, we know that economic development is certainly important to the community as well. And so consequently, we know that council has approved the planned development at the mill site, which certainly there's high interest rates now at this point, but hopefully, ideally, that will come along at some point that we'll have to consider as a part of the timeline moving forward as well. We are working hard behind the scenes to look at those two other potential options, how we can maintain services while reducing our expenses overall, as well as looking at maybe drawing some more economic development within town itself. Really, the goal is to look what I would call this budget quotient, where we want to make sure that we can provide the highest levels of service possible for the lowest costs, and we're always driving towards that.
Right. Thank you.
Hopefully that made sense. I see some puzzlement over there.
A few
Hopefully
word tweaks,
we
but
want
all right.
higher services, lower costs. Yeah.
Well, the appropriate level of service as
Yeah.
agreed to in our conversation with the community,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the highest level of service,
Well,
but the appropriate level of service.
Sure. Yep. Mhm.
At the best cost we can.
Yeah.
And given that status, what money comes in, goes out, there's nothing in between that makes money self-generate. So we got to figure out how to balance in between.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then Agenda Bill 2406 ordinance is utility tax increase.
Yes. So this would increase the utility tax on both our combined utilities. And when we mean combined, when I say combined utilities, I mean water, sewer, and stormwater. So the city's own utilities, as well as solid waste. So these are the four, well, really the two utilities, the combined utility and the solid waste utility, where we can actually raise our tax on that. In essence, when you pay your water bill, for example, you will see, I believe, a tax on that bill. And it's probably listed at a rate of 9%. Well, this would propose increasing that up to 12% from here. And so consequently, increasing it by that from 9 to 12% would generate roughly 200, let's see, hopefully I'm on the wrong one now. Got to get to the right one.
Can you raise it so we can see what the year is on the bottom?
But it's also on phone, cable, cell service.
Well, so those are
Electricity.
yeah. So there's certainly a tax on that, but those are restricted to 6%. And there's a lot of rules and regulations around that self-imposed by the state, but then also federally, especially on cable that comes into play too. I think that some of those options would be available to us, but you'd have to go out to a vote. So the value of this one is it is a councilmanic option available to council. And so that's why it's a part of your options here. If I can find the right one. Somehow I've just split my screen.
Page 125.
Close out of this and come back in. All right, I'm just gonna go from this.
So the graph is currently showing what the effect of that change would be on the crossover. And she's going to switch it back to current.
So the increased revenue from the utility tax would roughly generate about $270,000 starting in 2024. Given that we'd probably start at the quarter, increase to about $369,000 in 2025. basically, and then inflated from there based on basically the generally inflationary. It's usually based on how much we would increase our rates, for example. So the utility rate conversation that we would anticipate having earlier in this year, for example, whatever that rate is set at, we would usually incorporate as the inflationary measure when we estimate our utility taxes here.
Go ahead.
Does this graph here, does it also include the new Teamsters contract? So okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, it does, yeah. So,
So I'm gonna ask a repeat question because I still have issues with this graph. What's the logic that drives the jump between 2023 and 2024?
We haven't got that label on there yet.
On the revenue side, I don't believe that bump is really there. So take a look. It worries me that the lines may have crossed sooner than this represents.
well, so, let's see, is that revenue for 2024 or expense? Okay. Mhm. I know that they've explained it before, I've been told, so they're gonna come back and yeah.
And then it looks flat afterwards because we've taken out some of the same-ish revenues.
Mhm. So there you go, $300,000 for GMT, which we actually started collecting this year, which is good. That we'll collect next year as
Back up,
well.
GMT.
Sorry, that's the ground emergency medical transport billing that we, so this is the first year that we've actually collected money from the healthcare authority with the state basically to reimburse us for Medicare or Medicaid expenses from transporting people to hospitals and so on. The vast majority of fire departments across the state collect that. We've been probably one of the holdouts for a long period of time because we weren't able to get around to it. But thankfully we have this year.
And we're expecting 300,000.
Yeah.
I would ask
Go ahead.
what's involved in collecting it?
Basically, it's a report that we would have to submit to HCA. So we have hired just for like $10,000 a company called Systems Design to support us through that effort. They have to collect information from the fire department as well. And then ideally, I guess, our costs too that go into that in order to produce that report that they then submit to the healthcare authority.
Okay, so that's 300,000. Next one was,
So the comprehensive fee study is the next one. The city has not really investigated its fees in a long time. So I'm talking about parks activity fees, building permit fees and things like that, that haven't really increased at the rate of inflation. And so we want to make sure that we can play catch up on that as much as possible, so that we can generally recover the cost for some of the services that we're providing. You know, when you're going out there and you're, you know, they would say, I think grooming a ball field, for example, there's a lot of labor involved in those expenses for which we're not recouping from, say, the Little League organization that is, you know, pretty much, you know, using those fields after the fact, right? Certainly a benefit to them, but we need to make sure that we can set fair and kind of equitable costs overall to recoup some of that for some of the services that we're providing. You know, when it comes to building permits, making sure that those are fully cost recovered. We've got a building official and certainly some other people that do some work. It's not development review, so this is completely separate from that. We want to make sure that, you know, as much as possible, we can then support the building division with some of those costs or fees that we would charge.
and how much was that?
$300,000.
That was another 300,000, but we haven't completed that set.
We haven't completed it. Given the absence in the finance director position, that hasn't really.
Fix that.
Well, yeah. So certainly as a part of my targeted effort this next year, comprehensive fee study, I've had a conversation with the revenue manager about kicking that off. We'll probably want to work, my proposal would be eventually probably work with a consultant out there and have her help facilitate that internally for us so that we can get that going in the right direction.
Okay. That's six, I'm up to 600,000. You got to get me to a million. But it went from 9 something to, it went from, let's just call it to
Let's back
20
up
to
a
21. So there's
Can you
another
back up a
million.
second?
Wait. No, hang on. Let me finish my math. Let me finish running down the math how I get
need
there
a pen?
before we sidetrack. No, it's about $1 million difference. We're at 600,000. So what's next?
So there's the 100,000 increase in property taxes. There's a similar increase in sales taxes. There is a big jump in engineering charges and other CD charges. I think that that was anticipated because of mill site, but it's actually been realized because we went after some past historical billings that were never gone through. And then the rest of it, I would say everything goes up just a little bit. And when you have X million dollars, a little bit starts to add up.
And did,
GMT.
okay. No, he explained GMT. So on the expense side for 2024, does that currently include the increases for Teamsters we just discussed? Are we at the stage where we include anticipated increases for the police, or that's still that's still a ball in play? Okay. All right. But there wasn't. How come I'm not seeing a bump in the expenses line then?
For 2024 or for when?
For 2023, 2024, we just did $738,000 in the last agenda.
Because 2023 went up as well. So you're,
Okay, so they,
yeah, they went
Okay.
up together.
thank you. Sorry to drill this chart.
Also, for some of that Teamsters agreement, the impact is across different funds, right? So we're really just looking at the general fund here. We have a conversation around the utility rate study that's really encompassing just the enterprise funds itself. And so the utility rates have to, in essence, solve the costs associated from the Teamsters contract within that area itself. So this is really kind of a focus on what I would call general governmental operating for the most part. There's generally three other buckets: internal services, enterprises such as our utilities, and then governmental capital. And I know the former council member that used to sit in your seat would often probably talk about that and just trying to set it up like that as four separate kind of buckets, that its own separate ecosystem. And we're just dealing with one ecosystem right now.
Okay, you had a question?
No, you answered it.
Okay, cool.
And I think you did mention, budget manager mentioned that there is a reduction in revenue because of the Salish Lodge going into trust and eventually into reservation, so.
Yeah, did we lose?
I got a quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
The comprehensive service.
Comprehensive fees study.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not exactly set up for it yet. We haven't actually gone after it. How confident are we that we'll be able to capture the 300,000?
That was,
Well, so we've certainly had this conversation during the last budget cycle about how confident we can be. Certainly, I mean, it really is hard to say. This conversation took place as well around the B&O tax audit and whether we could generate more as a result of that. And so subsequently, council's action at that time was to remove any sort of revenue associated with the audit itself that we would hope to conduct. I'm not here to promise anything because I think that would be disingenuous. And so, yeah, these fees have not been raised in a very long time, however, and we have not investigated that since I've ever been here. And I think even since Rob Orton, who you may recall, Councilmember Holloway, I don't think he investigated the or any sort of the fee structures. A lot of them don't increase at the rate of inflation.
Right.
And so consequently, because we don't have that set within the code at all, we aren't seeing, necessarily the revenue driven from that.
Ultimately, the answer to your question is going to be based upon the decision of the council. It's our job to provide these opportunities in front of you, and it's your choice to eat the steak. Our goal throughout the fee process will be to identify true cost, what we're recouping currently, and let the council decide what level of discount there should be due to community benefit or not. So we really can't answer your question because it's going to be a process. But the finance director is correct. I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, the fees out of Public Works are really out of whack. Just on that alone, you ought to be able to make up that money. They're really out of whack.
Okay.
Okay. Conversation. Where were we on? So that was, we left off at utility. And
Yes.
The next one would be.
So the next one on your list is the public safety sales tax. In essence, this agenda bill would result in a submittal of the ballot proposition to voters regarding a public safety sales tax increase of 0.1%. So in essence, like I said, our current rate is right now 8.9%. This will increase it 0.1% to 9.0% for the city. Keep in mind, if you're in regional transportation authority area, you're paying greater than 10% or 10% right now. So we've still maintained kind of our advantage, competitive advantage relative to other locations by, even if we were to increase it 0.1%. 1/3 of this must be used for criminal justice and or fire protection. Obviously, we would intend to use it 100% for criminal justice and fire protection. In essence, we believe this proposal is going to generate roughly $226,000 starting in 2025. We would probably propose I believe a primary election date. So that would be August the 6th, 2024. We anticipate taking this forward to the voters for approval. With that said, 15% of our 0.1% has to go back to the county. Unfortunately, that's just the way the laws are written basically on this one, which is why we're generating less than the 0.1% transportation or TBD sales tax that you saw earlier as a part of this table. So, but with that said, it's certainly an option. Public safety is certainly a concern of the community itself. We want to make sure that we can protect that and continue those services. And we think this is certainly a plausible option for council to consider.
So Director, the numbers here, that 226,000 for 2025, that does not include the 15% that would be recouped by the county.
Correct, right? So this would be only the city of Snoqualmie's amount that it would receive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at real numbers. Okay.
Yeah. And so
008 will be.
So this is always the one I think council in the past has talked a lot about, which is the property tax levy lift. This is the one that you would take out to the, once again to the voters. I think ideally around the August primary date or the November general election as well is a potential option here. We would not start collecting this until 2025. We've included an estimate of $500,000 in here. In essence, as a consequence of that, we'd have roughly a levy rate of 11 cents. This would equal a levy rate of roughly 11 cents per $1,000 assessed valuation. As a consequence, if you're roughly $1 million home, you're paying a roughly additional $110 annually, which, with that said, divide that by 12 monthly, it's probably a bit under $10 in order to support the city. So consequently, it would generate roughly $500,000, and you can certainly show that up here. And yeah, those are your 5 options in front of you. But as the mayor stated, there's certainly some options outside of what we've just presented here that we can more than happy to explore as well. And if we needed to, we can bring back additional options to council if none of these are acceptable to you.
In your table in this one, we're already at 8.72. Wait, is this current or proposed?
So we are currently at $8.72 per $1,000 assessed valuation. We have to keep in mind, however, that the city of Snoqualmie collects roughly 20 cents out of every dollar of property tax revenue that is paid by the property owners. So $8.72 is the total property tax rate that goes to King County as well. It goes to the Snoqualmie Valley School District. It goes to the state school fund as well to pay for that as too. And so roughly the city of Snoqualmie rate, unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me because I can't open up the PDF file, but
Well, in the table, it's 8.7, like you said, it's 8.72.
But there's a city rate probably associated or included in that table as well.
1.56.
Yeah,
Yeah,
1.57.
1.57. So this would increase that levy rate from 1.57 and what we're proposing to 1.68, I believe. As a consequence of this, one note to take away is the state law requires us to set a maximum levy rate in here. As we all know, property taxes have actually declined this past year. Your assessed valuation has actually gone down across all the different residences. So when you received your assessed valuation from the King County, you probably noticed that go down. Well, consequently, what happens is when the assessed valuation goes down, your levy rate increases.
Yeah.
It goes up. So if you're setting a maximum levy rate in an environment in which you're potentially going to see housing decrease or housing value decreases, it may increase the levy rate up to, say, $1.64, which means we can only increase it 4 cents if we guessed wrong, right? So it's a conversation to have around what do we actually set the maximum levy rate at, because currently it's $1.57. We want to add 11 cents to it, which would get you to 168. But in some cases, maybe you actually want to raise that even higher, even though in reality, what we're collecting right now is $1.57 per thousand. I know that's a bit confusing, but it is problematic, and I think a tendency of why some jurisdictions choose not to go with the property tax levy lift is because of that state requirement that we set a maximum levy rate.
But it also it takes the issue up a notch, but the issue's still there. You'll take it up, and then you'll have the 1% from there on. You will.
That is correct. So, I think the council is certainly, and the mayor has been interested in diversifying our portfolio over time so that we're not so reliant on property taxes. But this one is kind of the heavy hitter for the most part. So you can generate what you need. There are not a lot of sales tax options available within the state. The ones that we've offered in front of you are really the only two left available to the city itself to actually implement. Unless the state legislature comes out with a new 0.1% or 2.2% for something, or just for general services, we can't really do much in terms of setting the sales tax rate besides offering the two in front of you that you have here. So if our intention is to diversify our portfolio, sales tax options available here are the best that we can provide to you, basically. And so otherwise, we're gonna have to look at how we can grow economically to increase our sales tax and all that. So it forces us to make certain decisions in different ways.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was, and that was it for those. Thank you. Good conversation, and we'll have it again tomorrow night. All right. Where's the rest of the agenda? It is now 7:09. The next item for potential, traffic safety cameras. What's to say about that?
Finance?
So trying to pull up the agenda again.
It's just a title. The link doesn't go anywhere.
Is that in the discussion items, or is that actually right below in the revenue options?
Yeah.
Okay,
There was a discussion item of revenue options, which we just went through.
right.
The next discussion item was traffic safety cameras.
Okay, so we don't have anything prepared for tonight. So consequently, we'd like to defer that if we can.
Okay.
But that's a revenue option, right?
It is certainly, yeah, it is a revenue option available to them. And I don't have I think Janet has more comments on that than I do.
We do have a memo that I think we hit pause on for the purposes of this because we can't act on it quite yet. We would have to have a council discussion about where we would want, a council discussion and a study on where we would want cameras before we can take any action. So we do have some proposed locations. We should probably get that memo out just so it can begin to be discussed.
So we can't discuss it until we.
We could discuss it, but there's no actionable items. I guess the actionable item could be the study, but I couldn't bring forth like an ordinance or something to us.
So, but ballpark though, if we were to do this,
Mm-hmm.
What kind of revenue potential? I have an issue that, one, I believe we need to pay for the initial installation. Two, I believe there's a cost share with whatever service supports this thing. From three, I don't know that we have traffic volumes enough that would make this viable, depending on which intersection you choose. So have we given a gross, is this something really to pursue?
I believe based on, it's tricky to piece it together. I looked at Issaquah, I looked at Lake Forest Park. We would be looking at municipal court fees. We would be looking at fees to the company that runs these cameras. And then we'd also be looking at, there's just some internal costs. And I think my estimate, should I throw something out there? I want to say it was under 300,000 gross. After all the expenditures is maybe the maximum we could receive. But that is, that Issaquah has a camera at a really high volume location. Similarly with Lake Forest Park, we could put one on the Parkway by the where there's a park, which is maybe higher volume and people not in the city. The other best locations, according to the statute, are near schools. And then there's a few other locations, but you have to put in a lot of thought and effort and study as to whether they would be viable. Where routes meet is an option, so maybe where 202 and Snoqualmie Parkway meet, things like that. So there's it requires a lot of consideration as to where we put the cameras. And you're right, I don't think that we have quite the volumes that some of those other cities would, but I certainly think that there's,
that's why I was in Issaquah. That's why I moved to Snoqualmie. Traffic even 20 years ago was getting out of hand. Okay.
Yeah. So, and just the research that I've done, I got to be honest, I have a real issue with it, a real issue. I start to think about public safety and putting in traffic cameras. So now are we monetizing our public safety for our population? So there's that issue. The other issue is some of the areas you mentioned, for example, in Issaquah, it's a major thoroughfare. It's right back by the high school and the junior high school, and people are cutting through there to avoid Front Street. It's a major thoroughfare. We don't have, to Brian's, Councilmember Holloway's point, we just don't, we don't have that major thoroughfare traffic here.
these are valid points.
The other, and you mentioned that, we're looking at court fees because our officers having to go into court and the process of, the ticketing process. And so, I don't know, is that really where we want to go for revenue options? I'm just putting out thoughts. That's it.
To me, I think it would bring some public safety to the road, especially over near the elementary school. And also,
So I don't necessarily have an issue of using this as a public safety tool. Okay, but that's not what we have been talking at this stage.
Talking revenue.
We've been talking as a revenue tool. I do not want to put those gentlemen in the back of the room in a state where I'm saying, you guys need to do enough traffic violations to do X dollars per month, per whatever, go do. I much prefer that they have discretion to actually tell somebody, slow it down, versus immediately having to write a ticket because we forced them to write a ticket. Okay, I didn't mean to go there. I'm sorry. I wanted to.
My recommendation, if you do go there, would be to treat this revenue as one-time money. Because you can't count on it. You don't know how many infractions there's going to be over a period of time. So the safest thing to do would be to treat it as one-time money.
Pete, so it's the other concerns again. I think the initial cost is ours, and with all the costs, with all the revenue sharing from there, I'm not sure when this starts to pay for itself, particularly given our volumes. That's why I ask. I understand it as a safety tool. I don't understand it as a revenue tool because I'm not sure it ever makes money. Just given the cost of time and everything else. So, okay. What was it? That's enough of that one. I'm gonna hold off on the next ones. Well, no, I'm gonna hold off on legislative priorities for now. But commission handbook and bylaws,
That's just a comment.
So just information.
as we need one, or we need to review the one we got, or
We actually, our attorney has, excuse me, reviewed creating it. We have a commission handbook and he has been updating it. You know, currently we have 5 different commissions and they all have different rules. And so this would bring forward consistent rules for membership, terms of office, attendance, chair and removal. There's a couple that are ruled by state law, and so that wouldn't change. But here we would actually have something to be consistent across the board for all the commissions. And so we have the draft right now. We'll bring it forward probably at the next FNA meeting and then council.
okay. And I'm just holding off on priorities because at one, we've got a cram schedule here near term. 2, we got some of the beginning of the year silliness. Let's get through that. And then let's refocus back in on priorities and get that going. I agree. I'm just not ready at this meeting to have that discussion.
Okay, can we decide when? Because the session starts next Monday? I guess on the 8th or 9th, and it's only like a 60-day. So if we don't get to it till end of January, half of that time's already gone. So it's important to start addressing this because we're asking for some
I'm willing to have
funding,
discussion in the next FNA meeting.
mental health, all kinds of, that leaves it then until the end of, we lose 30 days in the legislative session out of 60.
Okay.
And I will point out, this has been on the agenda since August.
All right. I will try to pick up speed. I'm just not prepared to have a discussion tonight. Unless there are other objections.
No objections at this point.
Okay. With that, did we lose Kat?
Yeah.
We lost her.
Okay. I knew she had training she had to do tonight. So hopefully part of that beginning of the year we'll get the committee settled down and get going. All right, upcoming agenda items, informational only. I won't go through reading that. Let's go into review council agenda. Council agenda for January 4th. Go ahead and scroll down. Revenue sources options, the ones we just discussed. Are you sound like there was some more work to do on traffic? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, traffic cameras, or do we really want to talk that tomorrow night?
No, I don't think we're prepared. We'd like to probably push pause on that a little bit to have a further discussion internally before we bring you any sort of actionable item.
Okay, you already published this agenda though.
I can do an amended.
Okay, let's do it in a minute and go ahead and remove item number 7. The rest of them look good for discussion. All right, with that, why don't we go to the agenda for the following Monday? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem election, council committee liaison appointments. I may that may get postponed, it may not. We'll have to see how, there's always that thing of, let's get the Mayor Pro Tem in and then give that individual time to actually have that discussion. And then you've got appointments to Economic Development Commission. That's good. No additional presentations. We'll have a proclamation of Mentoring Month, which I'm good at. Good with, not good at.
Well, you
Good
get
with.
into that.
All right, and then we'll go consent agenda, approve city council meeting minutes for December 11th and approve claims report of January 8th. If you guys are gonna make some I'm replaying back the conversation. Were we gonna make some additional changes to the warrant report? We had some questions.
Well, there were some questions from Kat,
Yeah.
or Councilmember Cotton, basically.
But let's
yeah.
leave it on consent for now. If there are issues that arise as a result of that, or if there are additional questions that arise,
Yeah.
which often arise as questions make breed, we can pull it off consent. So let's leave it on consent for now, with the ability to pull off if we need to.
Okay.
All right, and then we'll have budget amendment for collective bargaining agreement will be first reading. Public Safety Committee, Community Development Committee, Public Works Resolution awarding utility rate study contract. There was some homework to go do, so a good place to have that in regular agenda. And we will move on to mayor's report, committee liaison reports and everything else. There was I'm sorry, my brain, there was something else. There was something else out of, I thought, Public Works.
They talked about the general plan part the general plan component got postponed to the next Public Works meeting.
Okay.
And we did the update on the utilities, so I don't think there's any other action items moving forward.
But the presentation on the waste facility and all that was just for Public Works, not intended to move forward to council?
Unless you wanted to go forward, but yes.
Probably not with this agenda. We may think about it maybe for the second January one. Let's talk about that next Public Works.
Okay.
All right. With that, I believe that covers the agenda. Are there any other revisions, alterations?
So this actually looks like a short agenda. And so can we add legislative priorities on our committee of the whole?
Okay, I got no objections. You okay with that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move the committee whole.
Great.
If we go long, it may be something we shift out, but committee of the whole is proper position for it. Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? If not, let's move forward with that agenda. And with that, I will, unless there are objections, I will move to adjournment. Don't you dare. All right, hearing no objections, we are adjourned for tonight. Thank you, everyone.